Hello there, Shannon here. It's good to see everybody again. It's been a while since I've recorded. I wanted to go over a specific topic before I cover a couple more movies that I've worked on. I've had a lot going on, been very, very tired lately. The weather's gotten me good. But I have not forgotten anything or anyone, and so I want to present to you this video before I break down the next couple of movies, because the scenario that I'm going to talk about today is found in both of these movies. And I want to talk about Esau and Jacob slash Israel. And I want to first say that, you know, everything that I'm doing here, and this is a reminder, is all based on Adam and Eve, Chavah, the Hebrew name. And so I want to show how Esau and Jacob slash Israel, they are basically archetypes of Adam and Chavah. Adam being an Esau and Chavah being the Jacob slash Israel. And I thought it was very important to go over this. It just came to me after a friend mentioned Esau and what one of our teachers said about Esau and who he thought Esau was. Esau is the character, the brother that sold his inheritance for a meal. Now, that was the physical, but I'm interpreting the spiritual. So if you go back to Adam in the garden, Adam traded his inheritance for a meal as well. The word akal, eat, means to consume and devour, and he consumed and devoured his neighbor and maker with his words. He is the one that received death in the garden as well. He traded his inheritance for a meal. So he is the first Esau, the first murderer. He did it from the heart, spiritually. And then it was replicated into the flesh through Cain. So now let's talk about Jacob and Israel. I've gotten a lot of flack trying to say that Chavah had the God seed and that she was holy just like her seed. Now, I understand where everyone is coming from, so I'm going to show you how Chavah is first Jacob, who then becomes Israel through trials and tribulations on the earth. Once our spirit enters flesh, it is cut off from the knowing that we have before we are entering flesh. And so therefore, we are going to be the one that overcomes the fleshly nature. That's Jacob. Esau is never going to overcome the fleshly nature. He trades his inheritance for a meal. He's the one that blames everybody else instead of looking at himself in order to overcome his fleshly nature. And so Jacob is the one who, yes, when he's born, his name means supplanter. And, I'm going to look at my notes here for a minute because I took some notes so that I could be as accurate as possible. But supplanter is to seize or circumvent or to take the place of another. And, that's replacement theology right there. However, and he does replace Esau, but he is God's replacement. It's not man's replacement. God replaced Esau with Jacob for a reason, because Jacob was going to overcome his fleshly nature and become the one who first wrestles with God and then wrestles with man. He's wrestling with the God part that is over his flesh. Satan is the one that rules the world, and our flesh is the firstborn of Satan, and we are here to overcome that nature that we have. It's our animalistic nature, the animal part of us that was sacrificed in the garden by the God speaking through Eve when she did not consume and devour her neighbor and make her like Adam. She did the opposite with her words. So she is a picture of Jacob, who is already warring with God in that he is overcoming the fleshly nature. And I'm talking about types and shadows or archetypes. These are positions that I'm looking at through the spiritual. And I'm hoping that by now, through the videos, if you have followed me through my videos, that you are catching on to what it is that I'm doing, and that you're understanding that I am showing the inner being of these characters and how to pair them up with one another. So yes, Chavah is not perfect. she's flesh of Adam's flesh. That would be Jacob, because in the story of Jacob, when God is going back and forth and calling Jacob Jacob, and then he's calling him Israel, he calls him Jacob when Jacob is being referred to as the older brother's father. That would be the fleshly nature. And it's represented by the Jews. But that doesn't mean that all Jews are like Adam. There is an Adam and a Chavah, an Esau and a Jacob/Israel in both parts of the book, as well as every kind of people on the world. Because those like Esau are the ones that hate, and they don't overcome their fleshly nature. Those like Jacob, who become Israel, they are the ones that are operating in love more often than not. It doesn't mean that they don't go in and out of having moments of not believing, being unfaithful, or fearing, which in the word it says there is no fear in love. Perfect love casts out fear. So if you go to the story of Jacob, when he's called Jacob when he's the older brother's father, representing the flesh, Adam, Esau, and when he's afraid to send Benjamin to go see Joseph. Now, like I said, the scripture says there is no fear in love. Perfect love casts out fear. So he is having to overcome living in fear, being fearful, and not trusting that God is going to take care, and that all things that happen are for the best of everybody involved. And so I wanted to basically share that, some people think that Esau, like one of our teachers, thought that Esau represented the Muslims. Well, I understand why he said that, but we cannot categorize a whole group with these archetypes, because I'm going to use the example of if a father or a husband in a family goes and murders somebody. That does not make the wife guilty. It doesn't make the children guilty. It means he himself is guilty alone. So the whole family is not going to be considered an Esau, the murderer, just because one of them did it. So we can't say that all Muslims are Esau. We can't say that all of Rome is Esau, because it was the leaders and various people in there acting like an Esau, but it wasn't the entire people. This has to be done on an individual basis. It has to be understood that in every walk of life, in every kind of people, we have both. And so the way to understand who is by what is coming out of the mouth. Are you blaming others and insisting, that you cover yourself? Because let me look at my notes real quick. Because Esau, that name comes from an Arabic name which means to cover. And what he's doing is he's blaming others to cover himself. That's what Adam is doing. Adam is doing this with his words. He's blaming Chavah and God in order to cover himself. So let's look at the fact that Jacob dressed as Esau to pass himself off as Esau. Aren't we all flesh? Our spirit is dressed in the same thing. Hairy from the earth, we all look the same. This is how we can be mistaken for one by Isaac, who mistaken Jacob for Esau, because we're all in a fleshly body. But the God of Spirit knows which one of us, which type of human being is of his spirit. And Isaac pretty much was playing the part of Satan, who wanted the fleshly nature, the firstborn, to be that carries on the name. But the God of heaven says, no, those that are like me are going to carry on the name. That's the secondborn. That's those who look like Chavah. That's those who are Jacob and become Israel. So I wanted to bring that out, and it just came to me when the subject came up. I didn't actually have that in my notes or see it that way until after I thought about it for a while. And it's not that, it's not that either one that thought that the Muslims were Esau or that Rome was Esau. It's not that they were wrong about the initial idea of that. It's just that not everybody in those groups is the same. And there are innocent people in each group being persecuted and murdered because they're being lumped up into one sum. That's like the United States. Maybe the leaders can be, but not even all the leaders are, because God has his people everywhere to balance things out. Now, until the big switch where God's people really do take over because of the big reveal of who really is the enemy and who isn't, you know, for the most part, the leaders and the people that have been running the world, the people that have, been running things, are more of an Esau than they are of a Jacob. But when they understand that, I promise you, there will be some changes made, and it won't be us changing anybody. It will be them changing themselves from within. Because we can't change anybody. The only people we can change is ourselves. Now, I will say this. We are allowed, and it's from the story of Esther, there is a certain point in time when we are allowed to fight back as the Jew. That decree came that, he said that Haman could go and kill the Jews on a certain day, but he also decreed that the Jews could fight back. And it really has to do with the cycles of death, burial, and resurrection. During burial is when you win the fight. Okay, so resurrection, you are starting to actually live again, but it's not until the next step, which would be for us to live, because if it's death for one, it's living for the next. So if you've already gone through that cycle of death, burial, and resurrection, like Queen Esther, who first was going to give the banquet on the third day, but she changed it to the fourth, that's because on the fourth, that's burial. We don't actually win the fight until the enemy's being buried. So there's still a good chance during the death part that they can come back and not die. So we haven't really won the war until it's their turn for burial. And it's a cycle. You either choose death up front like Chavah did, and you go through the death, burial, and resurrection, or you're on the other end, the Esau end, the Adam end, where you're choosing to live, and then die. But just because you're dying doesn't mean you're buried yet. That's the fourth step. So I'm showing these patterns, and I'm showing you the characters that are playing the same types of spirits. I'm showing you what my philosophy was from the beginning fits. No, Chavah was not perfect. No one that's in flesh is perfect. That was the death she chose. In the word akal, it does mean to consume and devour, but it also means to consummate a marriage. And that word akal, becoming one, consummation, it's not about a physical sexual union. It's about becoming one in the same body. You're one with the fleshly nature and the spiritual in a flesh body. That is what she's agreed to do. And that's what in the New Testament God said he wants to do, is to live and tabernacle within us. This is our temple. It's the many mansions that God has for us to dwell in, because it's our soul that's dwelling in it. But remember that the perishable cannot inherit the imperishable, and the flesh is perishable. It cannot inherit the imperishable. It's mortal. It can't inherit the immortal, but our inside can. And it will go on to have a new everything, because God said he makes everything new. So I hope that, I'm tired. It's a little late. I've been putting things off and procrastinating a little bit. I've been nervous. It's not easy for me to get in front of the camera. Many people may think it is. It is not. I don't really like it. I don't really like pictures. I'm not a person that really likes to be out there, but I know that it's what I've been called to do, and so I'm going to do it. But I have really struggled with it for the last 3 or 4 months. I've had lots of information to share for a very long time, but I really have been waiting, for the perfect time. And I'm glad I waited on the movie, because I did not have this particular video subject prepared until about a week or 2 ago, when the conversation came up in passing on Facebook. And I had to think about it for a little bit before that really came to me that, Chavah, those that are like Chavah, the God seed, the seed of Yeshua came from her because she was doing as a living sacrifice what he did on the cross as a physical sacrifice. And he represents all of us because if we have that same essence within us, we are the living sacrifices. He has the highest name because he was called to do it in the flesh, physically. And he did it so that the rules on earth could be given back to Chavah's way from Adam's way. Adam got death. Yeshua came to do it physically in his place. His flesh represents what Adam was. Adam got death, but his spirit represents what Chavah was. And so that's the picture of why he was really called to do that. And it does fit Old Testament rules. He is the firstborn of what? His flesh is what was called to die. The flesh is the firstborn of Satan. The fleshly nature is what we are all battling. And it's our job to put death to it and let the spirit rule instead of the flesh. Chavah's already the king, but Adam was ruling over her. And the picture of that is each human being where our flesh is ruling over our spirit. It's not listening to what the God spirit wants, it's listening to what the flesh spirit wants. So the idea here is to turn it around and give the kingdom back to who it belonged to in the first place, the God seed that Chavah represents through Jacob/Israel. And we are coming to the climax of that, where everything is going to be made known. The understanding of the word is being poured out right now as I speak. And I've been doing it for a very long time, and I've seen a lot of these things for a very long time. And this comes again from my chapter, the flesh is to the husband as the wife is to the spirit. The spirit in each one of us cannot leave this house. It has to stay home. The flesh goes out to work the field. So, in the misunderstanding of that, we as humans have said, well, women need to stay at home. And it is ideal. But that was not the original. All of us have flesh, and we go out and we work by the sweat of our brows, and we are capable of doing that. And it can be any kind of work, and it can still be work in the home. And then all of us are capable of having the Spirit of God that stays home and trains the children up in the ways of the Lord. The children just being other people who came from God. Be it your own children, other people's children, it doesn't matter who. But we train them up by being what we are training them to be. By loving, by sacrificing what we want for others until it's our turn. And God makes it known when it's our turn. He elevates us after we have overcome the fleshly desires. And within each one of us, and some of us look better on the outside than others, but it doesn't mean that we are, because the inside can hide what's going on the inside and make things appear to be one way outwardly when they're really another inwardly. And I'm going to get into that in the next two movies that I'm covering. I'm going to be covering how we have been trained by the physical message to call that which looks good, good, and which looks bad, bad, but that's really not what's going on here. And that is why we're calling good evil and evil good. We haven't understood as a people, as a whole people, not individuals. There's plenty of individuals that understand it, even if they don't know how to speak it, but because they do it correctly. But just because something looks good doesn't mean it is. And just because something appears to be bad doesn't mean it's bad. It could be that they are working through their Jacob part of who they are. And this is why we do need to go to the first commandment and remember that it's God that led us out of the land of Egypt by the hand, meaning when we choose to walk upright and we are not falling to the flesh anymore, it's not us that's doing it. It's the God in us that's doing it, because flesh is not capable. That's how we remember, and that's how we keep from consuming and devouring our neighbors and makers when we are looking and seeing them doing something that really we shouldn't be doing. We're all going through the same fight here, and we're fighting our own flesh. That's the war within ourselves, the enmity between the seed of the woman, that would be God's spirit, and the seed of man, that would be the serpent spirit. Man meaning human, not men. It's just that God's stereotype was that Adam was a man and Chavah was a woman, because there are more men like Adam and there are more women like Chavah, but there's always exceptions to those rules. Any stereotype has exceptions. So if the shoe is not fitting you, don't try to put it on, because I'm not calling anybody anybody. I'm showing you what is on the page. In the story of Jacob, like I said, until he sends Benjamin freely and decides to be courageous instead of fearful, then he's called Israel, because he's overcome that fear that comes from the flesh instead of the spirit. I could even talk about even further. I was thinking about how Jacob was buried with Leah. Rachel was buried outside of the land, but where do we think that Israel was buried? Because Jacob represents the fleshly nature. Leah represented Adam's nature. She wasn't loved because she didn't love. We can't have what we're not willing to give. Rachel did. She's outside of the land. She dies giving birth to the spiritual. Why do those births happen late in, Abraham and Sarah, and there were a couple of others that produced late? Because the firstborn is going to produce first. When we're born and when we are coming up and we're learning our lessons, that which is of the fleshly nature is usually obvious, and we're giving birth to that first. It's not until later, when we've learned our lessons and we've wrestled with our flesh and with God and with man. When we wrestle with other people that have the spirit of the enemy in them, that's wrestling with man. We've wrestled with God, the God within us. The God meaning the God of flesh, not the spiritual nature. They are two separate. That's why there's a big G and a little g in the Bible. And that's something I will get into much later. But, no one wants to believe there's two gods, but we know there are two, because we know one of them is ruling the world right now, and it's not the one that we all want to serve. We want to serve the spirit of salvation and redemption, the essence that was in Yeshua. He was the walking example. That's what a real teacher does. They actually do the word. That is how they teach. Just do it, and then those under you that see that will follow, and they will understand it, because who cannot want and respect one that walks in love? The ones that want to hate and take their position and make a Cinderella out of them, or a Little Mermaid, and shut them up and not let them speak and show what they actually know, because God gave it to them, because they serve that God. Because we hear the voice of the one that we serve. And if we are serving the enemy, the God of flesh, then our voice is the one that voice is the one that should be quiet. And that voice is actually considered the female spiritually. The voice of God that is put in both men and women is the male spirit, the male voice. That is the voice that is supposed to speak. But we still are judging people by the physical. If you know how to see somebody spiritually, you'll know if they're actually a male on the inside or a female. We are all both. The question is, which one are we walking in? Are we walking in the fleshly nature? The fleshly nature is the female nature, because it is the one that receives. The female receives and the male gives. The giver is the male. So if you want to claim to be God's people, you say you're a Jew, whether it be inward or outward, which I don't care about religion. I'm not even speaking of religion. I don't claim a religion. I am a Bible believer. But I think the Bible needs to be seen the way that it was actually meant to be seen, and not the way that those who are of the fleshly nature have interpreted it. That would be the literal. In the physical world explains a lot of half-truths, but a half-truth is a lie. So we need the whole truth, and the whole truth is found in the spiritual part, and God is spirit. So we need to be able to see all of that, and everything that I'm speaking about is not the literal. It's not about Jewish history. It's not about the two houses physically. Now, in my book, I do explain why physically the two houses, Judah and Israel, separated. And it was for the same reason that Adam and Eve were separated. Adam was of a different kind after Eve was pulled out of him, because that's when the seed of the enemy was sown within him. Okay, but that's why the house of Judah and the house of Israel were separated. But there were some taken from the Judah and put with the house of Israel, the 10 tribes, because they had the spirit of Israel. They were not of the same. And that's what I'm saying. Both sides have both spirits within them. There are people who hate and people who love in every walk of life, in every religion, every culture. I don't care where you are, even if you're on an island and you're cannibalistic, there are still people that love within those people. Or everybody would be dead. Somebody's got to lay it down and let someone be a chief. So, and God wants us to take turns. And so he, the Spirit of God that lives in us, if we choose to hear that, we're going to outlast those who don't have that Spirit. They're going to self-destruct. That's just what happens. And then our turn can arrive. So I hope that I have made it clear who Esau and who Jacob is, and that Jacob is that step with for Chavahs, and those who are like Chavah. Jacob is that flesh of his flesh, flesh of Adam's flesh. Chavah is flesh of Adam's flesh. Well, Adam represents fleshly nature. Jacob is that part of Chavah that she has to overcome to be Israel. That's what she agreed to become one with, flesh. She's not one with flesh in that she's going to be the accuser of flesh and God like Adam. She is the one that's going to overcome the fleshly nature of wanting everything to be about me, myself, and I. Never being satisfied. Never being content or grateful. Never putting an eye on oneself instead of everyone else, the evil eye. So I hope that explains, because I know a lot of people are like, you can't say that Chavah was perfect, only Jesus is perfect. Jesus, the man, was not considered perfect. It was the essence in the man which makes his flesh the Son of God. But if we all have that essence within us, we also are sons of the living God, like Seth. Death, burial, resurrection. It's kind of like, Adam said, I begat a woman. Well, Chavah agreed to become one with flesh, in that she's going to be like him and break rules. She's not breaking the same ones for the same reason. She's not walking in hate. There's a difference. But then Chavah says, I begat a man with Seth, because Seth is walking in her spirit. And that's resurrection. Cain was death, Abel was burial, and Seth was resurrection. And she was not speaking with him, I begat a man, in a sexual way. She's speaking in the spiritual way. He is like her. We have a mom and a dad, heavenly. Our flesh is really the mom. God is the male, but the serpent on earth is really the female. But it looks like the male in the flesh. Because as above, so below, but in the reverse. The first will be last, the last will be first. And of course, those are concepts I've explained in the past videos. And I'm trying to go over them and over them and over them so that somebody can catch it eventually, what I'm talking about. I know it's a lot, and my videos are deep. I am really looking at the details, the patterns, It's I'm not looking at the surface level. It's the soul level. It's not the Peshat. And I'm taking the cycles and the definitions of names and showing who is whom and why. So I hope that out of this video that you get that Chavah is overcoming the fleshly nature that she agreed to become one with Adam when she chose to eat. She's chosen death in order to give and have life. And Yeshua said, choose death in order to give and have life. He said, come to me as a child. Well, what do children do? Well, they believe that everybody's good, but they also break the rules until you teach them not to. They will believe a stranger is good till you teach them not to talk to a stranger. Well, who was the stranger in the land? Adam. Because he had the spirit of the enemy within him. That made him a stranger because he wasn't a friend. He wasn't like her. But she didn't know that. So she also had her waist girded with truth, because when she said the principality and power, the serpent deceived me, she's also saying, I believed. Well, it's written that we're not fighting flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. So she's stating what is written. She has her waist girded with truth. And why is that important? Well, so that you don't go to your belly. The serpent went to his belly. The belly's the appetites of the flesh. If your waist is not girded with truth, you will go under the waist to the belly. And you will be living from your animalistic nature. That was the animal sacrifice in the garden with Adam and Eve. And that is why they were both covered, because she covered him and she took the blame. So with that being said, I hope that that clears some things up, gives you something to think about. I don't expect everybody to agree. I'm just giving my perspective on it, and I'm trying to set you up for my next two videos. I'm going to be covering a movie called I Thought My Husband's Wife Was Dead. And in this movie, you can rent it for $3, I think, on Prime. There's a character playing the serpent, a character playing Adam, and a character playing Chavah. And I'm going to show those characters and why. And all the scriptures that are entwined in there. There's name changes. There's death. There's sacrifice. All kinds of stuff in that movie. The other movie I'm going to break down is Wicked. And I know there's a lot of people that don't want to watch it, but I tell you what, it is a movie about calling good evil and evil good. And so, with that being said, I hope that gives you something to prepare for the next videos that I put out. And until I see you again, you guys have a blessed day.